Hi scholars, it's Miss Aline again. Thank you for joining me for lesson number 2 of our C3 curriculum. Today we're going to continue to talk about identity, and specifically we're going to focus on the two parts of identity definition that we didn't focus on the last lesson, part 1. And so how do we define identity? As we said before, your identity is who you are. Your identity forms as a result of the many different factors and experiences that you've had. And today we're going to talk specifically about the interpretations and assumptions of society and the influence of other people. So in our previous lesson, we talked a lot about the things that we felt were really important to our identity and some of the factors that shaped who we were. We talked about things like religion or personal characteristics or personal preferences. But today we're going to focus on society and how, to what degree society shapes who we are as well. And then we're going to talk about other people's opinions and how other people would describe us and the influence that plays into our identity definition. So I'm going to start by sharing a video with you. I will say the video is about 5 minutes. So it's a little bit on the longer side, but please do watch it and pay really close attention, because afterwards we've got a few reflection questions on the video.
Once upon a time, in fact it was on a Tuesday, the bear saw that it was time to go into a cave and hibernate, and that was just what he did. Not long afterward, in fact it was on a Wednesday, lots of workers arrived near that cave. While the bear slept, they built a great, huge factory. As winter turned to spring, the bear awoke and stepped out of his cave. His eyes popped. Where was the forest? Where was the grass? Where were the trees? Where were the flowers? What had happened? "I must be dreaming," he said. "Of course I'm dreaming." But it wasn't a dream. It was real. Just then, the foreman came out of the factory. "Hey, you! Get back to work," he said. The bear replied, "I don't work here. I'm a bear." The foreman laughed. "That's a fine excuse for a man to keep from doing any work, saying he's a bear." The bear said, "But I am a bear." The foreman stopped laughing. He was very mad. "Don't try to fool me," he said. "You're not a bear. You're a silly man who needs a shave and wears a fur coat. I'm going to take you to the general manager." The general manager also insisted the bear was a silly man who needs a shave and wears a fur coat. The bear said, "No, you're mistaken. I am a bear." The general manager was very mad too. The bear said, "I'm sorry to hear you say that. You see, I am a bear." The third vice president was even madder. The second vice president was more than mad or madder. He was furious. The first vice president yelled in rage. He said, "You're not a bear. You're a silly man who needs a shave and wears a fur coat. I'm going to take you to the president." The bear pleaded, "This is a dreadful error, you know, because ever since I can remember, I've always been a bear." And that's exactly what the bear told the president. "Thank you for telling me," the president said. "You can't be a bear. Bears are only in a zoo or a circus. They're never inside a factory, and that's where you are, inside a factory. So how can you be a bear?" The bear said, "But I am a bear." The president said, "Not only are you a silly man who needs a shave and wears a fur coat, but you are also very stubborn. So I'm going to prove it to you once and for all that you are not a bear." The bear said, "But I am a bear." The president packed his vice presidents and the bear into a car, and they drove to the zoo. Bears at the zoo said the bear was not a bear because if he were a bear, he would be inside a cage. The bear said, "But I am a bear." So they all left the zoo and they drove to the nearest circus. "Is he a bear?" the president asked the circus bears. The bear said no. If he were a bear, he would be wearing a little hat with a striped ribbon, holding onto a balloon and riding a bicycle. The bear said, "But I am a bear." When the president and his vice presidents returned to the factory, they put the bear to work on a big machine with lots of other men. The bear worked on the big machine for many, many months. After a long, long time, the factory closed and all the workers went away. The bear was the last one left. And as he left the shut-down factory, he saw geese flying south and leaves falling from the trees. Winter was coming, he thought. It was time to hibernate. He found a cave and was about to enter when he stopped. I can't go in a cave. I'm not a bear. I'm a silly man who needs a shave and wears a fur coat. As the days grew colder and the snow fell, the bear sat shivering with cold. I wish I were a bear, he thought. Then suddenly he got up, walked through the deep snow toward the cave. Inside it was cozy and snug. The icy wind and the cold, cold snow couldn't reach him there. He felt warm all over. He sank down on a bed of pine boughs, and soon he was happily asleep and dreaming sweet dreams, just like all bears do when they hibernate. So even though the foreman and the general manager and the third vice president and the second vice president and the first vice president and the president and the zoo bears and the circus bears had said he was a silly man who needed a shave and wore a fur coat, I don't think he really believed it. Do you? No, indeed, he knew he wasn't a silly man, and he wasn't a silly bear either. This excerpt comes from Facing History and Ourselves, Holocaust and Human Behavior. For more information on this...
Yeah, so as we saw in the video, it's kind of a funny video, but it's really interesting and gets us thinking, because the bear started off thinking and knowing, like, I'm a bear, and then before you knew it, he was like, no, I think I'm a man. I'm just a hairy man that is working at this factory. So it's kind of an interesting video to watch and think about how society and other people shape our identity. So I have some reflection questions in the video. One, why didn't the factory officials recognize the bear for what he was? And normally we do these, as a class discussion, but obviously we can't do that now. Why didn't the factory officials recognize the bear for what he was? Well, lots of reasons, right? One is he was in a factory, so they just assumed, well, if you're in the factory, clearly you must be a worker here at the factory. Why did it become harder and harder for the bear to maintain his identity? And this is kind of a crazy thing to think about, but the more people told him who he was, the more he just kind of accepted it. And the more he just felt like, okay, yeah, I'm a man. I'm a hairy man that works at this factory. And that's true for us too, right? Like a lot of times, if people just tell us enough times, this is who you are, we kind of start to think, yeah, I guess that is who I am, huh? 3, what were the consequences for the bear of the way others defined his identity? I mean, it literally changed who he was, right? It literally took him from being an animal in hibernation to being almost a human working in a factory. For what dilemmas arise when others view you differently than how you view yourself? This is a really interesting question. I really want you to take some time to think about it, because central to who we are is our belief of who we are, but also what others believe or who other people believe that we are as well. And it could be a little bit conflicting, right? Because a lot of times we think one thing of ourselves, but if we hear something differently from enough people often enough, it might begin to change who we are. And we just have to really stop and be reflective about that piece and really think about, to what extent am I deciding who I am, and to what extent are other people defining who I am for me? Like to what part or how much am I allowing other people's opinions of myself to shape who I am, right? And that's kind of like a really interesting question to think about, especially right now as you're in high school. And for a lot of us, and even as adults, this is true for adults, for a lot of us, other people's opinions of us really matter and really shape who we are. Number 5, what did the bear learn at the end of the story? Well, I don't know. I think that's a really interesting question, and I'd like you to kind of make your own conclusions, but I almost feel like he kind of realized, all this time I could have been in hibernation. All this time I could have, I didn't have to be out in the cold. And he kind of made that realization for himself. But it's a really interesting question to kind of think about. And I'd love to hear some of your take if we were back at school. Number 6, what theme or lesson can you create about life from this story? How can the story connect for real life? Well, we've kind of answered this already, but it really can help us to reflect and think about, to what degree are we allowing other people to influence and define who we are? Now, normally if we were at school, I'd have you take some time now to do an identity chart, which is basically you just write me in the middle, and then you think about all the parts of your identity of who you are, and you kind of create them into this diagram, and you put them all stemming from the middle box. If you have time, this is not going to be mandatory. I'm not going to collect this, but if you have time right now during this time of quarantine, this would be a really great activity for you to do on your own and really get you thinking about who you are and how you define who you are. So you don't have to do it for the purpose of this assignment. It's not mandatory. I'm not gonna, you don't have to turn it in or anything, but if you have some time, this would be a really kind of neat thing to do to get you thinking about yourself and how you define yourself. So let's jump right into the exit ticket. There's 5 questions on the ticket. 1, what factors shape your identity? We already talked about this in question 1, in part 1, but it's basically these factors here. Your family, your likes, your dislikes, interpretations and assumptions of society, and then the influence of other people. So that's the answer there for number 1, that middle key point. And then what parts of your identity do you choose for yourself? So really think about, how do you, what parts do you choose? Do you choose to be kind? You choose to be X, Y, Z, whatever it is. And then 3, what parts of your identity do you feel are determined by others, by society, or by chance? So society has decided I'm a student because I'm, 16 years old or 15 years old or whatever. My parents decided that I should be a basketball player, and so I'm playing basketball, but because my parents sort of, made me or whatever, or my teacher made me do this. So, I am now in Model UN because I was forced to, or whatever it is, right? The parts that are defined by other people or even by chance. And then 4, which parts of your identity do you feel are authentic and or wanted? So which things do you choose for yourself? And that's really who you want to be. And then number 5, which parts of your identity do you feel are inauthentic, false, and are unwanted? So what things do you kind of do because you have to, but you don't really find that are true to who you are, or you don't really necessarily agree with them, but you also know, like, I have to do this because it's who I am, or even this is just a tag that was given to me by society. A lot of that could maybe have to do with social economic status or even stereotypes. Think about how others view you and sort of what kinds of identities that they've assigned you. And if you can't think of any, describe an identity label given to you by other people or society that you feel is inauthentic or unwanted. If you guys have any questions, I want to bring this video to a close, but if you have any questions, feel free to reach out and I'd be happy to talk with you more about this or explain the questions a little bit better if you need me to. I'm here to help. Just let me know. And otherwise, I look forward to reading those responses from you. Thank you and have a great day.